Hello and welcome everyone. I am Dr. Mr. Sexboss Gangsta, Head of Research at Trojan Condom Company, and today we're going to be reviewing the nut equations. The nut equations, discovered by myself and my team, were found about 3 to 4 years ago. After being refined, the AP has finally decided to let some of our material into the curriculum. So for all of you AP biology students who are struggling a little bit, I've been requested by the College Board to make a bit of a tutorial video going over my equations and their applications. But without further ado, let's get started. The first equation we're going to be going over is the orgasm strength equation, aka the nut quality equation, a very simple equation. PT over Sexboss Gangsta 420's constant. We'll just call it 420's constant. It is important to note that T over 420's constant is also equal to the nut ratio. They are often separated in equations, but if you have a nut ratio, the equation becomes even simpler. You just multiply quality of porn times the nut ratio. That simple. Of course, quality of porn is P. T of N, Google Docs was giving me a bit of trouble with this one. It's T of N is the correct notation, time since last nut, and of course, 420's constant. And then O, naturally, orgasm strength. The next equation is the volume of nut equation. Some shorten it to VNUT. This is a bit more complicated. It is a logistic function, but we'll go over it anyway. The top here is genetic constant, and that is over 1 plus Euler's constant, E, to the negative orgasm strength time since last nut. You will not have to solve for any of the variables with this equation. You will either be given all of the numbers to plug in order to get V nut, or you'll be looking at a graph, and it's more likely you'll be looking at a graph. A few things to note is that the time is always recorded in days. So if you receive time since last nut in hours, you have to convert it to days in order for it to function properly in this equation, as well as the volume of nut is always output in milliliters. So that's important to remember. You're not getting 9 gallons, you're getting 9 milliliters. Big difference. The last equation is the instantaneous self-respect equation. We shorten it to the shame equation. The first part here is a bit more complicated, but it can be simplified. So the first part, the more complicated part, is LPT over omega 420's constant. But what we noticed was that the orgasm strength equation was actually embedded in. So we substituted that, and now we get the low equation, L orgasm over omega. This is omega, not W, but it looks like a W, so we call it the low equation. And that's an important mnemonic to remember, because the lower the value, the more shame, if that makes sense. The average shame value is about 3. So if they have a value of 1.2, they're a bit ashamed. If they have a value of about 2.8 to 9, they're more or less neutral. And if they have a value of 5, let's say, they're more prideful. L is length of penis in inches. Time since last nut, we've already been over. Omega is porn intensity. There is a scale for that on the reference table. We'll be going over that in a second. And then S of X, naturally, instantaneous self-respect, or instantaneous shame, or instantaneous pride. We'll now be going over the reference table. First up on the docket is 420's constant, formerly known as Sexboss Gangsta 420's constant. 420's constant is equal to exactly half of a 24-hour day. In other words, half a day, 12 hours, 720 minutes, or 43,200 seconds. Next, we'll be going over Sexboss Gangsta 420's hardcore scale. Beyond the AP level, this scale is much more complicated and really not refined. We're still in the process of doing that. We've given you a simplified version here, more for the purpose of the problems themselves and for simplicity. Number 1, vanilla. This is your default level, the lowest level on the scale. Number 2, anal. Number 3, incest. Number 4, cum stuff, which is important to note. Cum stuff is not a simple facial, or a cream pie. It is more, putting it in a glass and drinking it, or putting it on a donut, or something more, I guess, playful, more exotic. Number 5 is pregnant. Number 6 is bondage. With bondage, that we do not mean, a spank or a slap, or we mean more rough stuff. We're talking chains, whips, hot wax, maybe a hog tie or something of that nature. But not just a simple spank. 7 is rape. not real rape, fantasized rape, but in the sense that it's fantasized, but in a sort of dramatic, like, dark way, dark sense. Number 8 is monster/bestiality. Fairly self-explanatory. Number 9 is child. And number 10 is sexually separated violence. And sexually separated violence is not like bondage. It's more like a video of someone getting mugged on LiveLeak. The violence that occurred in the pornography was completely separated from a sexual context. It is just regular everyday violence that you are masturbating to. Hentai can be a bit confusing, but if you follow it exactly, you should be good to go. You add 1 if hentai up to level 5. Up to level 5. So vanilla anal incest comes off pregnant, add 1 if hentai. In other words, real bondage is equal to pregnant hentai. Make sense? Okay, good. Subtract 1 if hentai from levels 7 to 10. So if it's rape, monster bestiality, child, sexually separated violence, subtract 1 if hentai. Add 1 if rough, except for 6, 7, and 10. And this is because 6, 7, and 10 are naturally rough, and that's why they are ranked so highly. And lastly, on the reference table, we'll be going over the units of time and their prefixes. If you use seconds, there's no prefix. Seconds is a very standard unit of time in the world of science. There's no prefix for seconds. Minutes is MU. Hours is O. Days is DS. So let's just use a simple example. If you calculated a orgasm strength value using minutes, what you do is, before the value, just put MU. A little MU, and then whatever the value is. So if it was 2.3, MU 2.3. Simple. And it's the same for all the others. And of course, again, seconds has no prefix. And that's about all there is for the equations and the reference table. So we'll do one quick review. We have the orgasm strength equation, PT over 420's constant. We have the Venut equation. It's a logistic function. You'll most likely be dealing with it when it comes to logistic graphs. And lastly, we have the instantaneous self-respect equation, LPT over omega 420's constant, or it can be shortened to the Low equation. 420's constant is equal to exactly half of a 24-hour day and all of its relevant conversions. We have 420's hardcore scale, which we know is being watered down for simplicity's sake, but is still a good reference. And lastly, we have units of time and their matching prefixes. On the next episode, we'll be going over some practice problems to help you enforce these concepts, but for now, that is all. Thank you for watching.